No one likes it when companies lie, and I just gotta say, it's getting a bit ridiculous when it comes to Uber and Lyft. And this massive issue, you may be wondering with the title, okay, well, what are they lying about? And that is the whole situation of too many drivers being on the road. I want to do another dedicated video about this because I've talked about this a few times, right? Starting off near the end of last year, near the end of 2023, I talked about this issue that seems to be more and more pressing of a lot of drivers being on the road at bigger times. And this has a huge impact on things like peak hours and non-peak hours, especially, that I'm going to talk about in this video and everything. Because in the end of 2023, I started to get more and more comments of people saying, hey, Mark, I know you're mentioning this is going to happen next year, or right now in 2024. It's already happening. There's way too many drivers on the road. A lot more people are signing up with Uber and Lyft. And I've even done a video, like I do every year, about should you drive for Uber and Lyft in 2024? Is it worth it to be an Uber driver and a Lyft driver in 2024? That video was about an hour long, pretty crazy. But one big point of that video is too many drivers being on the road. And the reason why I really have to talk about this is because it's weird the way Uber and Lyft is going about it. Now, I did a video, I think a couple weeks ago, I covered an article where Uber stated, well, there's more passengers than ever before. Traffic is up. And Uber and Lyft, I think sometimes, and you see this a lot in like politics, I think especially, that they answer questions in such a way, it's almost like a half-truth. Or they're giving a full truth to only a partial aspect of the question. And the big question is, well, is this affecting drivers? And Uber says, Lyft didn't really comment in this article, which is not necessarily an admission of guilt, but I think Lyft just didn't comment. But Uber said, oh, there's more passengers using Uber every day. More and more people are taking Ubers. There's more people taking Ubers and more people signing up to take Ubers, right? So that is true. But they're lying to you, I think, about the full truth. And this is what's unfortunate. Now, granted, how is this going to play out in real time? It is tough to say, right? I don't like making videos, and it's tough, right? Because I say this a lot, especially recently. I don't like making videos that are pure, like, what's it called? FUD, I think is the slang term that's used in stock trading, which is like fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I don't like spraying stuff like that. But it is something I'm seeing more and more comments now. I am getting comments daily of drivers saying, hey, Mark, I saw that you mentioned this too many drivers being on the road thing. It's a huge issue. It's happening to me in this place in Utah. It's happening in this other area, I'm getting comment after comment after comment. And I'm like, it's unfortunate because Uber's stance, what seems to be when they were asked about this matter is, well, more people are taking Ubers. But that's not the case. And to use some quick math, explain it super simply, and I'm making this up, right? I don't know the exact statistics off the top of my head. Let's say Uber requires, and this is not true, but let's say 10 new customers a day. Just making that up. Well, they probably require 20 or 30 new drivers a day. Now, granted, that's a lot. I don't know what the exact statistic is, at least at the exact time of this video for 2024. But yes, there are more people taking Ubers now. There's more Ubers happening, and there's more people signing up for Uber, right? There's more Uber accounts being created every day. Same thing with Lyft. However, the trajectory of the increase of passengers is not correlational in any way with the aggressive trajectory and increase of drivers being on the road. There's significantly more drivers signing up than passengers. And again, I'm making stuff up that maybe for every one passenger ordering an Uber, there's 5 new drivers signing up to drive. Again, I don't know what the exact statistic is. I've not seen a dedicated article just about this, so I can't really give an exact mathematical, specific. But this is an issue that when Uber was asked about it, their main stance was hey, there's more passengers signing up. But it's like, they're not wrong. They're not wrong. But they are partly lying to you. Or maybe if I even use the new word gaslighting you to be like, well, yeah, there's more people signing up, but it's not in any way correlational to the more drivers being on the road. And this is, I think, going to cause, in my opinion, a lot of issues. Now, things get really tricky, though, when you get into the nitty-gritty. Like, for example, if, let's say, they get 5 new passengers a day who sign up and create an Uber account, let's say, on their phone, well, that's more and more Uber rides happening. And it has been shown that more Uber rides are happening more. More people are using Uber to get to and from work. I mean, it's crazy that even 5 years ago, I guess 2019, if we look at that, pre-pandemic, there were some people who I knew were sort of like, I don't know about this Uber and Lyft thing. I just don't know if I trust it, getting a stranger's car. Now, I feel like it's so common. And it reminds me of that meme I saw that was like, don't meet strangers you don't know, and don't get in a stranger's car. And now, in 2024, it's like, you meet strangers on the internet for dating, like Hinge and Tinder, and you get in strangers' cars like Ubers and Lyfts, right? But, so there's more and more rides happening, which equals out for more drivers on the road. But the issue still, that there's not enough drivers signing up, correlational to how many passengers signing up, and this mix match means there's more drivers on the road just waiting to get a ride as opposed to passengers, and that I think is a massive issue. And what's tough is, as far as I've seen, there's a few solutions I think that could be put into play. But as far as I've seen, one potential solution, which I think would be bad, and I don't think they would do this, is to have a cap. They say, you know what, sorry, you want to sign up, you're going to be put on a wait list because we have too many drivers being on the road, and until, like, say, we get more and more passengers to kind of make things even on both sides of the equation, then once that happens, we're going to sign you up, but until then, sorry, you can be on a wait list. That's one potential solution. I do not think they're going to do that. Second thing is a driving wait list after you sign up. Meaning, and again, I don't think they would do this either, right? But let's say you go to hit that button to turn it on. Remember, Lyft and Uber is instantaneously flexible. You can turn on the app whenever you want. You can turn it off whenever you want. So for most people, they're like, hey, I'm going to go drive. I hit a button. And imagine if you get an alert saying, sorry, too many drivers being on the road. Check back soon, later, whatever they're going to say. I don't think they would do that either. The biggest benefit of Uber and Lyft is that it's instantaneously flexible. I just talked about this in a previous video talking about like the big things I've realized or learned. After interviewing over 1,000 drivers to get all these different perspectives of different drivers from all around the country, different places. And a big one is a lot of drivers, 90% of them, the biggest thing they like is the flexible schedule. But not just that, it's instantaneously flexible. You don't have to say to Uber and Lyft, hey, this Thursday, 5 p.m., I'm going to drive. You just turn it on whenever you want. You turn it off whenever you want. And if they did something like that, which again, I don't think they would do, it's not as instantaneously flexible as it used to be, right? Like, and so that I think is another potential solution, but I don't think that's a way to go about it. The third one, which is something, again, just giving different solutions to this problem, and then, like, again, talking about the whole problem as a whole. One third solution I think that maybe could work is a minimum hourly guarantee. Now, this is something that's happening in California for Prop 22 and for New York after the new wage law got put into place. However, getting into the nitty gritty, and again, this is why I'm putting all this into this video, that this is becoming a bigger issue, just to say that sometimes it revolves around what's called active hours, not just, I call it, I just forgot the term, not stable hours, or inactive hours. I'll just say active versus inactive, I guess. There's another word I was thinking, but I can't grab it. But yeah, when it comes to active hours, that means, are you driving? Meaning, let's say you go online, and you're like, all right, you're online, and let's say an hour goes by, worst case scenario, and you don't get a ride. In a lot of the clauses that I've seen now, and some drivers have commented on this, actually, which is really interesting, you will not get that minimum hourly guarantee depending on the exact specific terms. Meaning, literally, you just wasted an hour. You just completely wasted that hour. However, if actually you do get a ride and it's considered more of an active hour, then things get a little different. Now, again, the accounting gets tricky. Even when I reviewed the new wage law in New York and how it affected delivery drivers, for example, they had different options. Uber Eats, or excuse me, Uber, who owns Uber Eats, obviously, and then DoorDash, for example, had an option of, do they want to pay their drivers per hour, per active hour? And I believe the active hour is $29 an hour. I believe the regular hour, so to speak, is like $16. The math gets very interesting. I think they decided to go with active hour. But this kind of adds into that play of like, okay, going on that third solution, just give them a minimum hourly guarantee. Well, then that becomes kind of like a subtle fourth solution, which is you pay them from the time they start working to the time they stop working, a minimum hourly guarantee that's fixed as they get, I'm making this up, $15 an hour minimum. If they make more than 15, great. If they don't, no big deal. However, and this is why this is such a complicated issue, this is now more moving into the territory. Once you say, okay, they definitely get an hourly guarantee, but it's not an active hourly guarantee, it's an hourly guarantee. It starts moving to the whole issue of moving more and more into drivers being employees, right? Now, this is also, again, another mess. And that's why I'm throwing a lot of different aspects of this going on, because this is a multifaceted issue that I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit worried about. And especially on this channel, it's interesting for me, kind of like as like a observer of all these different people from all these different places, to observe and see what they're saying and commenting, that a lot of people are commenting, saying, hey, Mark, I know you keep bringing this up. It's an issue for me right now. I used to get 3 rides an hour. I used to overlap rides. In case you didn't know, when it comes to the Uber apps and Lyft app, you can accept a ride before you finish your current ride. That way you're kind of overlapping. So you're never like, because back in the day, when I first started driving back in 2015, you do a ride, you finish it, you sit there and wait. Oh, right, okay. And you kind of do this like stop and start. It's very like on or off. With the new system that I can't remember what year it got implemented, it was kind of like an overlapping thing, which is very efficient, great, a lot better for drivers especially. However, I've had some drivers be like, hey, Mark, like, I start a ride, I end it, I wait 5 or 10 minutes. I used to get multiple rides an hour or almost be kind of nonstop with that overlapping system. Now that's not the case. And again, this is like a whole multifaceted issue that I hate to say that I only see continue getting worse, right? And like I said, with this employee situation now as well, drivers, I will think now in March, there is going to be a new kind of legislation put forward into place by the Biden administration when it comes to independent contractors and protection, for lack of a better phrase, or word. And I do want to see how this is going to come into play. I've talked about this in other videos that what things look like on paper is very different than what's going to happen in practicality, right? So it's going to be interesting to see. But for me, back in the day, I wanted drivers to be employees. I think they should be employees. The main thing was protection, like I said. Now, though, I'm more on the stance of I think drivers should stay as independent contractors because it seems like that this new gray area that only exists for rideshare drivers, only exists for Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, where you're kind of an independent contractor, but you get some of the benefits of an employee. Like, it's almost like independent contractor with benefits, and that's the best phrase for that. You're in this kind of gray area, and I think that is actually huge. I think that is the best of both worlds, and I think that now that's becoming a lot more common. I think that's a huge leg up. For example, here in California, there's a bill passed called AB5 that talked about independent contractors and all this kind of stuff. There's one subclause to that involved one industry, and it was from Prop 22, and of course, one industry was ride sharing. It's interesting that when you bring up things like freelance workers and independent contractors, ride sharing is always the asterisk on whatever law gets passed, right? And the reason why I say all this is as things continue to get worse with Uber and Lyft, and I hate to say that, but I mentioned this on that video, like I said, where I interviewed over 1,000 drivers, the number one thing I heard, even if they liked Lyft and Uber or not, is that things are getting worse. Even if they love Lyft and Uber, even if they loved what they did, they still would acknowledge, like, yeah, things are getting a bit worse. And as things get worse, you then move into this territory like, okay, if things get so bad for drivers, who's going to be there to protect them? How are they going to be protected? And if things get so bad for drivers, what's going to happen when things really hit the fan, which is something that's happening now, in order for them to be protected in terms of paid sick leave and a minimum hourly guarantee and all this kind of stuff I'm talking about, right? Like, as things get worse, I think drivers start to scream out like, hey, like, things are not looking good. Is there anything you guys can do? Is there any protection we have? Is there any way you can pay us more? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I do hope that something gets put into play. I think this whole issue of too many drivers being on the road was something that near the end of last year, like I said, was on my radar. And then it seemed like it was getting a bit worse. And then I'm getting comment after comment after comment on this channel. And again, I'm not trying to spear that FUD, like I said, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I'm not trying to spread that. But it is a big concern of mine and a big concern of what is to happen in the future. Now, great, let me know what you think in your particular area. Maybe in your area, it's actually not that bad. However, it brings up this very unique paradox. I'll probably do a dedicated video about this. Well, I almost like to call it now the peak hour paradox. It's called the PHP. The peak hour paradox, and that is the most cliche advice you hear when it comes to driving Uber and Lyft or making the most amount of money. Friday, Saturday nights, morning, evening commutes. Boom. Now, though, I've talked to a lot of drivers, like say here in LA, because I do talk to most drivers in person. Obviously, I live in LA, so that makes sense. I would talk to a lot of drivers here in person. A lot of them are saying that now Friday nights are actually the worst time to drive. I was talking to one driver who was like, yeah, it's slow. And I'm like, this is like, I think it was last month. Because right now, at least at the time of this video, I am doing dry January. So it was last month and I was going out and it's like 10 p.m. Friday night. What would be considered peak hour. And they're like, yeah, it's super slow. They're like, and the guy was telling me like, dude, like there's too many drivers. It's so hard to get a ride now that if anything, you're better off driving in a non-peak hour. And he was telling me, you know, that he's like, look, it's just not worth it for me on Friday nights anymore because it's so congested and there's so many drivers being on the road that it kind of ruins it for everybody. There's just too many people and too few rides. And remember, like I've said in other videos in the past, when it comes to ride sharing, two things have to coincide at the exact same time. Meaning a driver has to be on the road at the exact same time as a passenger ordering an Uber or Lyft. Now, there's always going to be a lot of drivers on the road, and there's going to continue to be even more drivers on the road, but there's only a finite amount of people taking Ubers and Lyfts, and if all these drivers pick them up, and again, it's tough to say based off the algorithm, I've mentioned this before as well, I don't know the exact algorithm, maybe I could do some research on that of, is it similar to Tinder, where they boost the better drivers and boost beginning drivers? Is there a waiting list like FIFO, first in, first out? I don't know what the algorithm would be, right? But there's got to be something when it comes to the matchmaking. I honestly don't know, but this brings up a whole other issue that maybe in some areas you're better off driving the non-peak hours. However, this brings up a whole other negative issue, and I know I'm going aggressively down the rabbit hole, but again, I always like to be transparent in all my videos and look at every side of the equation and every side of the coin, that if the only good times to drive is the non-peak hours, the non-peak hours are better than peak hours. That could be potentially true depending on the area, and if there's too many drivers, you're still driving the non-peak hour, which means you're still making that non-peak hour money, which is basically almost nothing. And it stinks because I think there's a lot of benefits to Uber and Lyft. And I'm going to do a video soon, by the way. I want to say maybe like this week or next week. I'm going to do a dedicated video talking about the benefits of driving for Uber and Lyft. Because I do want to kind of throw in a positive video to like a positive video to be like, hey, I know there's been a lot of bad I've talked about, but there is a lot of good with Uber and Lyft. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I'm not saying I needed to, but I guess, there's a lot of benefits. However, I don't think I've seen, at least in my opinion, and this is where things get very dicey, I don't think I've seen an issue as worse for drivers than too many drivers being on the road. Yes, pay's been decreasing. Uber Lyft's been taking out more money. There's been more and more issues with things like insurance, where you kind of have to tell your insurance, or get rideshare insurance, which is what I suggest. And I don't think I've seen, at least from my knowledge, and let me know what you think in the comments, maybe besides the pandemic, which I think was definitely a very different thing, because that affected everything, that I don't think I've seen an issue that could affect, and potentially, in my opinion, will affect, and is already affecting so many drivers, as too many drivers being on the road. As the economy gets worse, like I've said in other videos, as the economy gets worse, a lot of people are saying, hey, well, I need to make extra money. I already have this 9-to-5 job. What's a flexible job that's easy to join, that I could easily sign up for and start making money? Oh, Uber and Lyft. And a lot of people are doing that, right? And especially if you think about, a lot of people do sign up, and this is what gets another whole aspect of this. Again, this is why it's such a multifaceted issue. There's so much to this. If you think about it, for most people signing up, with all the new and newer drivers, I'd say most of them are signing up part-time. Because they're like, hey, I need extra cash. Boom. Uber and Lyft is the perfect side job. Which it is. It truly is the perfect secondary job. But then, and when you look at the full-time drivers, those are the ones that are screaming on my channel, commenting and explaining what's going on, being like, look, I do this full-time. Like, I have to rely on this Uber and Lyft income. And I've had a lot of drivers comment something along the lines of like, yeah, I now have to drive 5 hours to make what I used to make in only 2 hours. And again, there's a lot of different factors to this. Drivers are going to pay less, like I've said in other videos. Uber and Lyft taking out a bigger cut. Inflation, gas prices. Although gas is kind of down right now, at least at the exact time of this video. But it is an undeniable fact that you have to drive more just to make what you used to make before. And if anything, which kind of stinks even worse, and is kind of the reality of the situation, it's almost like now you have to drive more to make less. And like I said, there's numerous different factors to that. And then when you add all this into this equation of then, with all this negative stuff going on, Uber and Lyft zeitgeist, if I call it that. And then on top of that now, you're throwing in more and more drivers to oversaturate the ride-sharing world and the ride-sharing market. It's only going to equal, I think, negative things for drivers. And again, there might be some solutions. Like I said, putting a limit on drivers signing up, I don't think that's a good idea. Putting a limit on how many drivers are going to be on the road, I don't think that's a good idea either. Maybe Uber and Lyft, I'm making this up, could maybe implement something where they say, hey, algorithmically, if you know you're going to be driving, maybe you could book a time slot in advance. I don't know if this is a good idea, but maybe they could say like, hey, you could turn on the app whenever you want, you could turn it off. But if you can guarantee us that you're going to be on the road at 9 p.m. on a Friday night, we'll boost you a little bit in the algorithm. That way we can kind of preempt that and kind of prepare in advance. Kind of similar to what they used to do with like Uber Pool, not Uber, Express Pool. If anyone remembers that back in the day. In case you didn't know, so surprised it was actually a thing. It was one of those things that seemed like a good idea in theory, but I don't think they'd ever bring it back. This Uber Pool, which is now called UberX Share, and like, Lyft got rid of it, but UberX Share, where you pick people up and drop people off. And there's something called Express Pool, which is even cheaper, where you'd have to like walk, like a 5-minute walk, usually in your radius. And it kind of turned Ubers into buses where they would drive. And the idea is like, so you'd be on a main road. And as opposed to going on a main road and going down a side street and picking you up, you'd walk to the main road and they would pick you up. And the concept was being that, yeah, it's great. You save a lot more money. Express pools were stupidly cheap. But now you're walking, and then you add in this whole other equation of if you're in, like, say, a dangerous area, but this also include getting dropped off. So, like, say you get dropped off, you're like, wait, I'm in some kind of sketchy neighborhood. There's a 5-minute walk from my house. I don't know if you feel comfortable, right? I don't think they're ever going to bring that back, but it seems like they're trying to optimize, that could potentially optimize the algorithm, like, in advance. Almost like as a passenger, I can book a Lyft for 5 a.m. a week from now, or a few days from now, just to make sure I get one, so they can preempt it. Maybe you could do that as a driver's solution. I don't know. Again, I'm just throwing out different things. But I think the number one would be a minimum hourly guarantee that does not have the algorithmic nature of having a having an active hour. It would just be the full hour, right? But then you add a whole other thing, and I think this is another whole thing to add into that, is like, would they actually do that though? Is if, let's say, I'm making this up, there's 10 drivers on the road, and let's say it's so congested, then in that 1 hour, there's 10 drivers on the road who don't get any rides. Now Uber and Lyft is shelling out $15 to each person. Let's say it's a minimum hourly guarantee of $15 an hour. Now they just shell out more money. That's $150 in that hour that Uber and Lyft just lost. And again, that's why it's such a tricky thing that I think Uber and Lyft it seems like they're not really commenting on it. The only comment I've seen, like I said, and this is why they're kind of lying to people, and kind of, again, to use that Gen Z word, gaslighting, is them saying, hey, well, there's more passengers on the road. There's more people taking Ubers and Lyfts, which is true, but it's not the full truth. Now, what's going to happen in the future? Again, it's tough to say. I'm calling the balls that lies. I'm just bringing out the transparency of this current issue, and I'm hoping things get better. Maybe they sign up more passengers, but as it seems like with the way the economy is going and things like inflation, with more people signing up, I think it can only get worse from here. And I hate to say that. I hope things get better, but it is unfortunate that it seems like they're still lying to a lot of drivers, trying to act like it's not as bad of a situation as it actually is. And what's interesting is I think one big indication of how things are going to get worse and continue to get worse, hate to say it, again, is the comments on this channel, right? I remember, this is going to sound kind of weird, but kind of relevant, kind of not. I remember this, I can't remember, I think there is a phrase, it's called something like, it's going to sound weird, but trust me, there's a point to this, called like strip club economics, or something like that. I think, super weird, but I remember learning this, that when it comes to the way the stock market's going, when it comes to inflation, when it comes to the economy and stuff like that, the biggest first sign of a recession is actually, I guess the first people who know the recession's coming up is actually people working a strip club, like exotic dancers and adult entertainers. And I remember learning that the reason why is they will say, like, oh, like, a lot of people are spending less and less money. And I remember learning that, for example, when it comes to some of the crashes that were happening and the recessions that were happening and everything, that they were the first people to say, oh, trust me, it's going to be happening in a few months. Just trust me. And they were right, because they've noticed it. Likewise, I feel like, in kind of a unique way, I feel like that when it comes to this channel, I feel like I'm seeing the, like, I don't know what the right word would be, the negativity, the like, not carrot on a stick, but like, I could see like the bad stuff happening in the future, or the storm coming, I guess is probably a better way to word that, because the comments on this channel are saying, Mark, like, it's kind of happening. And I think the comments I'm getting are almost just kind of like foreshadowing, or negative foreshadowing, of potentially what's to come even later this year. And granted, like I said, this could all be speculation, which it technically is, but I do want to bring it up for all the people driving, being like, hey, this is something you should be aware of, that Uber is kind of lying to you when they bring up and saying, oh, it's not that bad, or, oh, there's more passengers signing up. Like, yes, that's true, but it's still lying in the sense that, in my opinion, it's still the half-truth, or it is the half-truth. I don't know. It's just something I have to do a dedicated video about, because this is the kind of problem we're seeing all the comments, reading all the comments, that's only getting worse.